Did the U.S. Army esports team, yes, I just said it, violate the First Amendment by banning people from their Twitch chat based on what they are saying? Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs. I'm your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota, and today we're talking about the U.S. Army esports team's Twitch page. That's a real sentence in 2020, potentially violating the First Amendment rights of its viewers by banning them from the chat for discussing the United States Army's war crimes, or at least allegations of war crimes, if that is your preferred way of looking at it. It doesn't really matter to me. The question is this a violation of the First Amendment, or can the U.S. Army esports team regulate its chat away from discussions of war crimes? And the answer, let's put it out there, is it might actually be a violation of the First Amendment. And in my opinion, to go a step further, I believe it should be considered a violation of the First Amendment. Now, you may think that's a little crazy, and that's fine. I'm pretty strong on speech, so that's why I'm there. But let's look at it this way. The United States Army has decided to engage in social media, and especially social media targeting a younger audience on Twitch for a very specific purpose, and that is the idea of recruitment. It's a recruitment tool. They're choosing to engage in a space that is not traditionally occupied by the Army, and the purpose is to engage young people who might become interested or be interested in joining the armed services. And if that is their purpose, if that is their goal, and they are officially endorsed as the United States Army's esports team, I think they are government actors entering into a public space, and then therefore if they're engaging the public in this way, especially to their own benefit, then they certainly need to be subjected to the same First Amendment principles that any other branch of government should be subjected to. Now, the questions have been lingering for years about whether or not Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, are these public or private forums? Are they some sort of semi-private forum? Do they become a limited purpose public forum? And there isn't a fully fleshed out set of jurisprudence we can point to that gives us a definitive answer on this. But we got some answers back in, I believe, late 2018 about this, when Donald Trump was sued effectively for violating the First Amendment rights of journalists whom he had banned off of his Twitter page. He had blocked them on Twitter, thus sort of preventing them from engaging in speech with the President of the United States in a forum in which the President had determined that he was going to utilize. So can they actually stop that? And it was, based on the speech of the journalist. Can the President stop them from doing that on his Twitter page? And an appeals court said, no, the president's not allowed to do that. Now, interestingly, the appeals court didn't order the president to unblock them. They just said that the president shouldn't do it because they probably didn't want to get into a full-on fight with the executive branch over that. And the judicial branch may not have the power to force the president to do that anyway. But they did say that they shouldn't be able to do that, and that is a violation of the rights, which establishes that if that right were violated and you were subsequently damaged by it, you may have a civil cause of action against the government for violation of your civil rights. That being said, that's about as close as we get to this case. And the next step of that is it's a little bit attenuated, right? This isn't the President of the United States. This isn't Twitter. And there's less of a public forum feel to a Twitch chat than there is to Twitter. Twitter is a space where the world discusses the world. Twitch is a space where people watch people play video games or they pay e-thoughts. One of those two things is kind of what's going on. So it's a little bit different. I think it shouldn't be, but in reality it is. And so this is still an open question. But let's take a look at this article. This is from .esports, and I'll put a link to this article down in the description. We're not going to read all of it, and so go check it out if you want to see the rest of their thoughts on it. We're just going to grab the first couple paragraphs. The U.S. Army esports team potentially violated First Amendment rights by chat banning Twitch viewers asking about war crimes. Two attorneys weighed in on the matter. And I did pick .esports, even though they're kind of piggybacking this story from Vice. Vice is the news outlet that actually talked to the two lawyers. But here's the thing. Vice can get bent. I would much rather support someone other than Vice. So we picked .esports today. U.S. Army recently ventured into the streaming world, but things have been a bit rocky. U.S. Army chat banned a viewer last week for asking, quote, "What's your favorite U.S. war crime?" according to a tweet by esports journalist Rod Slasher Breslow. That's not entirely what happened. They also posted a Wikipedia link to U.S. war crimes. The act of silencing the viewer can potentially be deemed a violation of free speech protections, an ACLU staff attorney told Vice. So here's the video. You can go watch it. Rod Breslow's reporting on it, and it shows the banning and what led up to it. Quote, "It looks like what happened was a violation of the First Amendment," Vera Eidelman said. The staff attorney explained that a government can't determine what comments it does and doesn't allow on a public forum. We're going to get to that in just a second. The law firm that successfully sued President Donald Trump for blocking people on Twitter, the Knight First Amendment Institute of Columbia University, also weighed in, quote, "As a general rule, as established in our case against Trump, if a government agency or branch of the military operates a social media platform or website and they allow people generally to post comments, then typically that would be considered a public forum," senior staff attorney Katie Fallow told Vice. But again, I think there's certainly an argument that there's a distinction here. I don't think it's a great argument, but they're speaking very publicly and very confidently about this, and they're also speaking colloquially. They're not making legal arguments, so we gotta give them a little grace on that. So the conclusion is, since the Army-run Twitch channel is a public forum, Fallow continued, deleting comments or blocking viewers because of their viewpoint violates the First Amendment. All right, now it goes on to talk about the U.S. Army's Twitch channel having a set of chat rules. It does have those. Here are the chat rules. Real quick, there are 8 of them. We're going to just burn through them. Harassing, stalking, or threatening individuals, hate speech, spamming, hijacking, or disrupting the stream, links and advertisements, posting other people's private info, encouraging others to break any of these rules, messages that are not constructive, topics outside the scope of the USAE, and pushing personal agendas will be reviewed if they are deemed as harassment and moderated, and then anything which violates the Twitch rules of conduct. There's also a comical user agreement here. Only one of these things I think actually is really important, and it's this thing. And this is, as we'll discuss in just a minute, this is the one thing I think is valid, and that is the idea of operational security. Any of the comments that jeopardize operational security of the U.S. Armed Forces are not allowed. And I think that is the most reasonable restriction they have on here. But guys, they have a terms of use. They actually have a user agreement for the Twitch chat, which, I mean, great on them for doing that, but it's just funny to me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the constitutional law principles that are at issue here and clarify the common language that was used in the article by the staff attorneys and by the journalists, and bring it into a little bit more of a legal idea, just a little bit of education. All right. So there are a couple types of discrimination that are out there for the, or I shouldn't say I mean, it is discrimination, but speech restrictions that the government can use. There's content neutral restrictions. You can't say anything here, like you can't do this at all. No speech here is not the right place. And that has a level of scrutiny attached to it. And then you have content-based discrimination. And then you further have viewpoint-based discrimination. So what content-based discrimination is it's, you can speak, but you can't speak about X. can't talk about this subject. So in the context of this Twitch channel, you can't talk about the war crimes of the United States. Now, can the government restrict content-based speech? Yes. Explicit pictures and videos of children, for example, are a content-based speech that has been upheld by the Supreme Court as something that we regard as obscenity, and that obscenity is restrictable by a government agent. There are some other ones out there, but they're pretty limited. So how are they allowed to infringe upon your First Amendment right to free speech? Well, it's called strict scrutiny, and it's the test that the courts apply to content-based discrimination of speech. There are 3 levels of scrutiny when we're talking about the infringement of rights. And specifically in terms of speech, based on the type of restriction, there are 3 levels. One is the rational basis level. That means that the restriction has to be rationally related to a legitimate government purpose. That's about it. That's a really easy bar for the government to meet. Then you have intermediate scrutiny. Intermediate scrutiny means that it has to be more than rationally related to a legitimate government purpose, is the best way to describe it. It's really pretty subjective to the justices. They'll never say that, but it kind of is. It's more than rationally related to a legitimate government purpose. And then strict scrutiny is it has to be related to a compelling government purpose. So it's more than something that the government just legitimately has the ability to do. It has to be compelling on the government. And these are things like providing for the common defense, protecting life of its citizens, things like that. Those are compelling government interests. And then further step for strict scrutiny is that it has to be narrowly tailored to achieve the compelling government purpose, so that it doesn't basically sweep up otherwise legitimate speech in a net that is cast too broadly, for example. So that is the hardest bar for the government to meet under Supreme Court jurisprudence, and they can meet it. They have met it before. So the question is the discussion of war crimes in a Twitch chat is suppressing discussion about war crimes in a Twitch chat a compelling government purpose? I would say no, not at all. Of course not. Speaking negatively about the government is one thing that we have treasured most dearly since the founding of the country, and it's part of why this country exists in the first place, the ability to levy that criticism. So the next question is, would Twitch actually ban someone if they were speaking positively about war crimes as a subject? For example, saying that the United States has never committed a war crime ever and is strongly opposed to war crimes. And if that opinion is expressed and they don't censor that opinion, but they do censor the other opinion, now we're going beyond content-based discrimination and into what is called viewpoint-based discrimination. And this is basically forbidden by the government. And this is why there are problems with some of their other chat rules, such as hate speech, for example. The government doesn't get to pick an opinion that it likes about a subject. The government might get to restrict subjects, but they don't get to restrict opinions within those subjects. And this is probably a problem for the United States Army esports team. If Twitch, if a government agent's Twitch account is considered a public forum under the existing jurisprudence, then they're not allowed to discriminate based on that viewpoint, and they're only limitedly allowed to discriminate based on content. And again, there are some things on there that are probably okay. Harassing, stalking, threatening. Look, the US government would... Harassing, stalking, and threatening are specific legal things. And if they believe in good faith that they are achieving, or that those things are delving into those unlawful acts, then they should have the ability to go ahead and remove it. That would be, the preservation of legal speech on their platform would be a compelling interest of the government, especially when it relates to the safety of the citizenry. What the U.S. Army doesn't want to be is a place where people can go and they are allowing people to openly violate the law utilizing a platform of the United States government. That would be similarly improper. So stuff like that is okay, but hate speech is a different animal entirely, because hate speech, first of all, is presumptively content-based, right? It is a content-based restriction. It is hate speech based on sexist, racist, homophobic, etc. Okay, well now you've said that sexist, racist, and homophobic speaking is presumptively a category. But I would argue that sexist speech is viewpoint-based discussion about gender, sex, sexual orientation, stuff like that. So that is now saying that we can discuss men and women, but we can't discuss men and women in a particular way. And that should be a forbidden act. Under existing Supreme Court jurisprudence, the government doesn't get to pick what speech it likes about men and women. That's just not a thing it should be allowed to do. But anyway, we're getting off into the weeds here. This all boils down to, is this channel a public forum? If it is a public forum, then they are subject to the same constitutional restrictions on their activities that they would be anywhere else. Say on a sidewalk, right? If a government agent stops you from speaking on a sidewalk, that's a problem. But we do get into one more fuzzy area of law, and this one is less clear than that public forum thing. And it's the next logical step, and it's where these cases are probably going to end up in the next decade or so. But the question is, okay, if a government actor like Trump, for example, the president, is using Twitter in a way that makes it a public forum, that his Twitter page becomes a public forum, are then the platforms similarly restrained as some sort of either state entity, a quasi-state entity, or a limited purpose public forum that would prevent them from doing the same sorts of things? And that's an interesting question, because lots of Twitch's terms of service can be used to shield the U.S. Army esports team from otherwise inappropriate censorship. Look, we have to abide by the terms of the platform that we're on, and therefore that type of thing can be enforced. But if that is the excuse, then we have to start asking whether or not these limited public forums or these quasi-state entities, the big tech companies that run social media platforms, become, for the purposes of at least these limited spaces, and maybe for greater spaces, depending on how the courts want to go with it, do they become quasi-state actors, even though they are private? My argument there, as you probably know and have guessed, is yes, they should. They should not be able to limit speech in the same way that the government should not be able to limit speech. They should have the same restrictions imposed upon them, and I think that will make the world a better place. I really do. Because when you get to, if you don't like certain speech, the best thing you can do is expose it to the air, not seal it away in a jar to fester, but expose it to the air, let the other speech drown it out and kill it. That's the idea our country was founded on, and that's where we should be. So anyway, I hope you learned something about speech, the constitutionality of it, and the ridiculousness of the fact that the U.S. Army has an esports team censoring people, and that is a 2020 headline if I've ever heard of it. If you like this stuff, please like and share and subscribe and all of that stuff. It really helps me out. Also, come catch a live stream sometime, generally every weekday at 11 p.m. We talk about all sorts of subjects, but mostly just have fun. All right, guys, thanks for joining me today. Hope you have a good one. Peace. Peace.